music, participation, the environment of welcoming people, trying to create an environment where people feel cared for, and we're worshiping the Lord together as a community, not a group of individuals, but a community.
Welcome to Magnified Ministry Podcast, the podcast dedicated to inspiring, encouraging, and equipping parish leaders to build thriving missionary communities in today's rapidly changing world. This is the Magnified Ministry Podcast. Welcome back to the Magnified Ministry Podcast. Very exciting day today, Father Peter. We're joined by Father Jerry, pastor of Our Lady of Perpetual Help in Glenview.
Not far from where I used to be in Wilmette. Father Jerry, you know, a lot of people in Chicago would know him. If you are listening or watching from Chicago, you know of him, you know of LPH. Father Jerry had a lot of different jobs in the archdiocese, in parishes. Really one of those guys that it's just a pleasure to be in the presence of him, and there's a lot of insights about life and church and all the things that are meaningful to life. But also LPH is this incredible community that, again, everybody in Chicago knows somebody from LPH, first because of its size, but secondly, the parish is really incredible. So Father Jerry, would you just kind of give us a little bit of a sense, like what's LPH?
Yeah, it's a very blessed to be there. It's a large, active, intergenerational faith community. I always kid my associates, never talk about anybody, because you end up finding out that you're talking to somebody's nephew, niece, godmother, sister-in-law, brother-in-law. There's a lot of interconnectedness with families. But I love the, in the 1950s when I was a kid, there was a big thing to walk to church, and much of your social life centered around the parish community. For my parents, their social network was all connected to the parish. There's a lot of that in Glenview, of people who have, some of their closest friends are parishioners. They've lived in the community for a number of years. And so there's that feeling of church is really important. I want, my children to have the same experience of faith that I had. And it's just not parents with little kids. We have a large single adult community, elderly community, like any parish. But I'm always struck whenever we have gatherings, you'll see parents with, 4 and 5-year-old children, and someone that's been a parish parishioner for 70 years. So I love that mix. Sometimes in parishes, certain kind of activities draw older parishioners, but you don't get very many of the younger parishioners. Trying to get that, moms and dads of grammar school age kids more involved in parish life is a challenge. Many of them aren't regularly going to church. And how do we kind of find ways to bring them together? It's also, a parish that has resources, and, there are a lot of influential people in the parish, so there's a lot of connectedness. Sometimes it feels like, if I sneeze, I get a call from somebody in Calumet City saying, I heard you had a cold. I mean, it's just how people just talk.
That.
Yeah.
But when you started, as you were assigned there as a pastor and you took up, how do you start? Like, we just actually finished this 3-week series on being a new pastor, being a new leader, and the opportunities, the challenges, how scary it is, to start, and you feel you know things until you just don't. I would imagine it was overwhelming to go there just because of the size and the history. But would you just tell us a little bit, from your perspective, when you started as a new pastor there, when guys start as new pastors, when people start as new church leaders, what's some best practices? What do your suggestions would be? What did you start with?
Well, I was in priest personnel work for many years, and I watched guys that had launched very successfully their pastorates, and then ones that didn't. And there are many factors that can contribute to a successful launching of your career as pastor, and several factors that get in the way. one of the things that I felt that I learned was you first of all, you have to have a sense of passion of who you are and the kind of community you want to help lead and create. Then you need to take time to get to know the community, for them to get to know you. If I noticed with pastors that have a very bumpy road at the beginning is they're impatient, or they try to change too much too quickly, and then everything gets sidetracked, and he doesn't know us. Who does he think he is? Why did he fire this person or change that? Sometimes you don't have the luxury of waiting because of certain issues. I understand that. But I do feel once you get a lay of the land, long term you'll be far more effective. And I think for myself, this is a parish that has a long history, very strong investment in lay formation and lay education. So there was a lot to build on there. A strong tradition of lay leadership, a parish council, finance council, school boards. So I really spent a lot of time initially hearing the story of the parish, trying to connect with the newcomer and the old timer and people. We have a large school. Sometimes if the school can drive everything. Now the school's important, but it's not the only ministry in the parish. So trying to get a sense of the parish beyond the classroom was important in the initial going. And in those first months, people tell you things that are very helpful about what have been the challenges and what are the blessings of the community. I know you can get afraid to make change, but if you make it too soon, I think you regret that, is my experience. And as you know, Peter, every parish has its own culture, and it takes time to allow that culture to impact you. But some of your very first impressions are really important. I always tell new pastors to keep a journal, and just certain words you hear people using, certain experiences. When people talk about their history, it can say a lot about who this parish community has become or what they would like it to evolve into. I've been very blessed that I've worked with some phenomenal pastors in my past that have really influenced me. But it's a challenging time. It's always a challenging time. But right now, there's just a lot of, the whole secularization of the culture, people that have lost a sense of the Catholic story. It's trying to figure out these new and creative ways. And I've been grateful in the diocese for efforts like Renew My Church and the transformation process where, you got to have a sense of where we're at in order to know where we can go. And the church hasn't always done a very good job of it. Some people live in the church of 1950s. That was the ideal. And they kind of forget that they sort of romanticize the past. And that can happen in a parish, Keep talking about a certain era, like the best days are behind us instead of the best days are ahead of us.
That's right.
Yeah. So, Father Jerry, you've been at OLPH for a number of years. I really loved how you talked about the first months or year, however long, you just took the time to listen, to understand the community, get to know the community. But you had some sense of what you thought God wanted for that community in the future. Could you maybe talk a little bit about what it started to look like once you got connected and people started to know you and you started to be able to share a little bit of that dream? How did you go about activating, lay leaders or new lay leaders or your staff to come alongside you for this next chapter of OLPH? What did that look like?
It was interesting as I was walking into St. Clement's this morning, I saw that, so I know all are welcome. Now, to me, that's much more than a slogan. It's a kind of a passionate concept of who we are as a community. And one of the things that I became aware of is, OLPH could be a very difficult parish for a newcomer. Like, they might wonder, will I ever feel at home here? There's so many people, so many organizations. Will anybody ever know my name? And we had done some surveying early on where there was a feeling of, this is my church. I'd rather people say it's my parish. There's a big difference, the difference between a house and a home. So I wanted to change and encourage the staff to be much more welcoming and receptive of people. And, when people come with things, how do we get to yes, instead of coming up with the 10 reasons why we can't do this?
That's right.
And I had some staff people that everything was a problem, and I said, that's such a turnoff. Now, I know we have to have policies and don't get me wrong, but how can we take people where they're at? How can we find a way to invite them into a deeper connection to the parish? So some of it was on the staff level and with the associate pastors of trying to be more deliberate in our language of, I'm glad you're here. What are you looking for in our faith community? What are the obstacles that are keeping you from a deeper connection? When we were doing the discernment process for the parish council and finance council, I really wanted people on those governance structures to be in this mode of welcoming, inclusion, taking people where they're at, investing as much as we can in the faith formation of our parish. And, I look at the lay leadership now. I've been in other parishes where sometimes, you have the same people that are on these councils for year after year after year. And as good as they are, that limits the horizon. I'm grateful what happened 22 years ago, but we're not there anymore. And so trying to keep broadening the base of new leadership in the parish has been another thing. I'm very strong on the term idea so that we do get fresh eyes on things. And how do we keep opening our sense of how the parish can relate to the larger community? The parish has in its DNA a strong tradition of connection. We have 4 sharing parishes, and we have a strong social dimension to the parish ministry. And that really has had incredible impact as people form friendships and relationships with people they would not normally be connected with, whether it's in Inglewood or Pilsen. That's also helped. I know, another feature is just you got to stay on top of liturgy, in terms of music, participation, the environment of welcoming people, trying to create an environment where people feel cared for and we're worshiping the Lord together as a community, not a group of individuals, but a community. So as I look at investments of my time over the years, I think that's really resulted in an expansion of the number of people that are involved. And new people bring new ideas.
Sure.
Every year there's a new ministry that emerges, and I think it's because of that, hopefully that attitude that, how can we be an even more influential part of your faith experience?
How would you, one of the things that one would know about LPH pretty quickly is this, both this spirit of generosity toward the people in need, but also the spirit of care for each other. That really was kind of a inspiring factor to me, just watching it down from Wilmette, of the care for other people in the community, especially as they were going through some financial crisis. And we actually didn't have that at St. Clement, so we established this Love Your Neighbor ministry, kind of being inspired by what you guys did. could you talk a little bit about it? Because I think there's two things that happen is that as a church, we have this missionary call to help the poor, to serve the poor globally and across the city, and that's wonderful. But I think what sometimes the church is not great with is caring for people in their own pews, caring for each other. And I think you speak about this sense of welcome and community and belonging. And sometimes it's easier to care for people on the other side of the planet than actually be merciful to your neighbor, because you have to deal with the neighbor every day. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because it's very inspiring what you guys are doing.
Yes. That's something that has, evolved over time, naturally. We had a very influential pastor by the name of Miles McDonald who came to OL. He had been a pastor of Presentation Parish on the west side. So he went from a very poor parish to a fairly affluent parish. And he became kind of very significant in just we have to be aware of the needs of others, and both within our community and outside of it. And one of the legendary people at OL is Sister Pauline Held. She's a school sister of St. Francis. She sort of developed this ministry for the hurting in our community, physically, emotionally, financially. One of the things in suburban communities is that you can have the impression that you're living in paradise. Everybody's got beautiful homes and beautiful cars, and people don't want to hear about domestic violence, people who have a house with no furniture, families in crisis, people going through emotional challenges of one form or another. So it's really important that we create a safe zone for the hurting and those in need. Someone loses their job and anywhere, but like in Glenview, you might have 2 kids in college, you've got a mortgage, got car payments. Your life can fairly quickly, come screeching to a halt and be catapulted into a catastrophe financially. So how can we support neighbors? We've had people who, the parish was able to help them as they weathered a very difficult period. And then, they'd sort of like pay it forward. They return saying, you helped me. I want to make sure we have the resources to help others. Everybody, they say, is 2 paychecks away from a crisis. So it does, it's important. I've noticed, there's a mother that has cancer with 2 small kids and a husband, and then the community just rallies around them. Get the kids to Little League practice, meals, helping a family get through a very challenging time. That puts really a face on what the word community means.
Father Jerry, a question. One of the threads that Father Peter and I have talked about amongst ourselves and with some of our guests is this idea of reaching the next generation, right? I think we talked a little bit about it, that there's in your parish an intergenerational community, kind of people from all walks of life. As you reflect on your last 12 years and as you're sharing this idea of maybe retiring and moving less on the administrative, more on the ministry, what is your hope for this next generation, right? In some ways we talk about like we're clocked out, our time is done. It's like, what is this Gen Z all about? And how can we do it? Like, what's your hope for that generation? And what are you seeing in your community that makes you excited about that next generation of believers?
There's this interesting phenomenon that I had been reading about, like this past Easter, the number of parishes and their catechumenal programs, OCIA, had a number of young people who wouldn't fit the typical candidate for, and these are kids who were raised by parents that don't go to church, never had them baptized. In meeting with some of these, high school age, college level, while there's certainly a secular world, there's a spiritual hunger that these kids have. They want to get connected. They want to talk about their relationship with God. Now, you have to be open to the fact that they don't have the language that of how to express it in maybe contemporary Catholic language. But if gradually they're trying to find meaning, they want to be, they want to have a life that matters. They want to have an influence on the culture, and I think that engaging these young people is crucial. In my parish, half the kids that graduate go to Loyola Academy or Regina, or they go to the Catholic high schools. The other half don't. Now, I'm not as worried about the kids at Regina and Loyola because those are faith-formative high schools. You know, the public high school, Glenbrook South, Glenbrook North, trying to keep those kids connected is really a challenge. We have made some very positive steps forward in our youth ministry program, but trying to get these kids to feel that they're important to us and that we want to journey or accompany them in their spiritual life. You read those studies where, by 14 or 15 years old, a young person has pretty much decided, is religion to be a part of my life? So it's blinking red lights. I got to find ways to get those kids connected in some way, or we're just going to lose them. I find like a window that's really important is when a couple gets engaged. This is another kind of thing that gets me. Some parishes, when the couple comes in, the first thing is the 100 things you can't do at your wedding. And, it's like we should be on our knees praising God they want to get married in a church instead of making up it almost impossible. Young adults don't register for the most part. They're, so how do we rejoice in this moment? Same thing with baptismal prep. These can be just natural moments of affiliation. With the younger kids, our teenagers, like service-based activities, they really respond very well to that. And it's also, teaching moment with the kids to talk about what they're experiencing if they're visiting one of our sharing parishes or involved in some effort in the community. But we've got to put this as a very important priority in our parish life is how can we make this as welcoming to particularly teenagers and young adults. And then you do have this phenomenon of so many of them, they're not coming from families that regularly go to church. And
Right.
so when you could depend at one time on the parents
Right.
being very supportive, sometimes the parents think there's something wrong with their
Yep.
child.
Yep.
Why are they not doing this or doing that? So in terms of the future, we just have to keep reaching out. I am concerned in my parish with the parents of young children. How can we be as family-friendly, parent-friendly activities so that they don't see the school as just, or religious ed as something where you drop your kid off and the school takes care of the faith part of it, and
Right.
then you pick them up and take them to basketball practice. How can we be more engaging that way?
Well, it's fascinating always to watch, what you guys are doing and the way in which you wrestle with those questions. Let's just finish with that. So we have an American Pope. We never thought we would.
Chicagoan.
Yes.
One from Chicago. Tell us a bit, what's your take on Pope Leo?
Well, like everybody else, I was absolutely flabbergasted. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. And, I couldn't, when the Cardinal announced the new Pope, I couldn't hear what the name was. And then some commentator said, I hear it's a Cardinal from Chicago. And I'm thinking, Cardinal Sophus or Cardinal Gregory? I mean, I was wondering who it might be. I think it's just fabulous. I think that talk about the Holy Spirit at work, and how our political categories of how we see things, everybody doesn't really appreciate that it's not a question of, red states and blue states. It's what, as the cardinals were listening to the state of the world, who is the person that, could follow in the footsteps of Pope Francis. And I think it's going to be a tremendous moment for the church. And if you look at his background, he checks all the boxes of, speaks all these languages. He's lived on 3 continents. He's been a bishop in a very poor diocese, a missionary bishop. I'm very excited to see him on the global stage. It was funny. So the day he got elected, I got a call from NBC when I go to interview. They wanted to interview someone that I had, years ago when I was in priest personnel. He was the provincial of the Augustinians in the Midwest, and we had quite a significant presence of Augustinians. In some ways, we still do. So I go into the studio, and I'm getting bombarded. Is he a Cub fan? Is he a Sox fan? No, I'm thinking, well, how's the Pope's position going to be on, the economic order or the political? I said, I really don't know. I understand his mother's a North Sider, and I've heard that she's a Cub fan. But whether he is, I don't. Well, who can we talk to? With all the stuff going on, it was like the burning sensation. And but I think you hear stories of people that were connected to him in some way. But I think for our church, universal church, our global church, he is going to be a very significant voice. From every account, he knows how to listen. He's measured in his responses to things. He's sensitive to tradition, but doesn't seem to be held prisoner by it. And I think he will be he's made a number of statements on behalf of the poor and those in war-torn countries. He has seen firsthand the political upheaval that's going on in Peru. He knows a lot of that from his experience. So I'm thrilled. And I was on sabbatical a couple of years ago, and half the priests were from New York. And in their world, there's nothing west of the Hudson River except the Pacific Ocean. And they had this tremendous thing about Chicago. And so I had a lot of fun with them. And then we've recently had some of our auxiliary bishops become archbishops. So I'm always saying, gee, I wonder who's going to New York to see what Cardinal Supich thinks about that. Hilarious. But it's very funny. It's very funny. But it's great. What was great too was the announcement of the election happened while the kids were in school.
Yes.
So this creates a memory for them. They'll always know where they were at when the Pope was elected. Whereas in the past that was kind of hit and miss. It was just great. They were all glued to the television sets in their classrooms and so excited when they realized he was from Chicago. And
what an incredible gift.